from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. It's Tuesday night. There's a lot going on. If you want to join the program, feel free, 833-482-5337-8334, Valdez. Emmer is out, right? Tom Emmer wins the Republican nomination for House Speaker and drops out hours later after he was torched as a rhino by Donald Trump. And at least that's how I saw it go down. Maybe you see it differently. But according to Daily Caller, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer dropped out just, I don't know, a couple of hours right after Trump beat him up, called him a rhino on Truth Social. And Republicans were voting by secret ballot until they were able to get to a candidate who received a simple majority of the conference votes. And after each round of those votes, the member who received the lowest number of votes was eliminated. Candidates that were running had the option to drop out before each round of votes if they felt they didn't have enough support. 109 votes were needed to win. Before the first round, there were 7 Republicans running for Speaker: Tom Emmer, Mike Johnson, Byron Donalds, Kevin Hern, Austin Scott, Jack Bergman, and Pete Sessions. Sessions received the lowest amount of votes during the first round of votes and dropped out. Bergman dropped out after the second round of votes because he received the least amount of votes in that round. After the third round, Scott received the least amount of votes and dropped out of the race. Makes sense so far. After the fourth vote, Hern dropped out of the race as well, getting the least, and then Donalds voluntarily dropped out. Emmer secured the majority of votes during the fifth vote. Now, House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan was voted out of the race for Speaker on Friday after failing to receive the necessary votes on 3 separate ballots. Jordan lost in a secret ballot vote, 86-112. Now, you've got Emmer winning it, and then hours later, Trump says, he's a rhino, I don't know him very well, and a couple of other choice things. There's a lot of great people running, and then Emmer's out. So it makes me think, again, back to my conversation with my Cuban friend, who told me anything Trump touches, it goes awry. He's saying that Trump doesn't have any coattails. I'd say I beg to differ, because here you have Trump just merely putting out one statement on Truth Social, and Emmer's out. Now, I don't know what the if one is related to the other, but I can only suspect that they are, because how could you not, right? I mean, it seems clear as day to me. So we're going to get more in depth on the House Speaker race in a little bit, because we're kind of back at square one with nobody having secured the nomination. And it's definitely not a good look. I mean, listen, it is the process, but not a good look. We have to kind of really just take inventory, and somebody needs to stand up and say, listen, pull it together, guys. Pull it together. Let's go. Oh, boy. Anyway, additionally, internationally, here we go. We got Hamas rockets targeting Tel Aviv, and now Syria has joined in the festivities. Listen to this. And this is from the Jerusalem Post. There were rockets that came from the Syrian army, including mortar launchers, etc. And Israel hit them right back. IDF spokesperson said that let's see, I don't want to get into the weeds here. Armored brigade, blah, blah, blah. All right. Well, bottom line here is they got hit with a couple of rockets. They hit them back with a couple of rockets. and things seem to be intensifying. Then you've got the report that I mentioned a couple of days ago, all right, which was that there are a number of U.S. military installations or other international military installations where there are U.S. soldiers, and those have been hit. So it doesn't seem like anything's getting better, right? Things are getting worse. The Israelis are somewhat indefinitely paused on their ground assault, as there's 222, I believe, is the number of hostages that are out there. Not a good thing. And in my opinion, the longer that they take, and I appreciate and respect the restraint that's being displayed here by the Israelis, I do. However, the other side of that same coin, where we can compliment one's restraint, is the fact that every day, every hour, every week that goes by where there's less action taken is more and more time for the enemy, the Islamic Jihad, Hamas, to rig booby traps, to create a counteroffensive against the Israelis that would benefit Hamas. Right? And when we hear from the women that were released, the hostages, they're saying this is a very elaborate web of tunnels that's running beneath Gaza. So I can't help but wonder and think, man, we're giving them all this time. First, Biden goes in and calls a timeout. Then you've got these days to come, and they're releasing hostages. And I guess as long as they're releasing hostages and are able to spin it however they want to spin it, then, of course, we're in a situation where they can do whatever they want because they've got time on their side. So I don't know how this is going to play out. My hope is that we could minimize this as best as possible. But let's see. We got some breaking news here. Breaking news. Let's see. I'm going to give you House GOP now gives the nomination to Mike Johnson after Emmer has dropped out. House Republicans nominated Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, for Speaker. Let's see, an hour ago? Nope, 47 minutes ago. 15 minutes ago. There we go. For Speaker, making him the fourth GOP congressman to win the conference's nomination. It's the second nomination within a day after Majority Whip Emmer, can't even say that, dropped out of the running amid the GOP opposition. Johnson's nomination capped off the end of a whirlwind day. Yeah, tell me about it. We can barely keep up with this. All right, so now we've got Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson is now in the running. I don't know. I'm taking bets. You guys let me know if you're with me on this. I'm taking bets that this may not last. I don't think he gets through and becomes Speaker. That's just my thought. Early in the day, Johnson came in second to Emmer, nominating in the secret ballot, and then in the rest of the nominating vote, which spanned 5 ballots. And now Congress is, or at least Republican congressmen, have come back to start the process anew, with Johnson beating out 4 other candidates for the job. Johnson's 51 years old. He's been the House GOP's vice chair, a junior leadership position since 2021. He's also a former chairman of the Republican Study Committee, and that's the largest conservative caucus in the House. Other candidates in the mix were Byron Donalds, who I think would make an excellent speaker. He's also with the Freedom Caucus. And let's see, we've got Mark Green from Tennessee, chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, and Freedom Caucus member Chuck Fleischman, another Republican from Tennessee, as well as Roger Williams. So let's see what happens here. Let's see if he can get the votes. I mean, I can't imagine if Jim Jordan can get the votes. I don't see how Mike Johnson's going to get the votes, unless everybody's like, hey, you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of having this conversation. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stick with Mike Johnson. We'll see. I wish him the best, and we're going to invite him on the program. Let's see if he's got time to make it. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be on the Hill whipping up votes and trying to make sure he wins. But that's the latest on the breaking news. Trust me, I doubt you've heard that one anywhere else. That happened 15 minutes ago. So there you have it. Mike Johnson is now the nominee. Emmer's out. Mike Johnson is in. This is tough to get your arms around. And we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the need for men to be men, what they like to call toxic masculinity. We're going to hear about that in a little bit as well. And more talk on this topic as well. So keep it locked right here. I am Rich Valdez. I'm with you till 1 a.m., keeping you company most of the evening. Phone number again, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to talk about the House Speaker race. I want to talk about some of the polling that's out there. I mean, there's so much to discuss. And one of the best out there in the polling business is John McLaughlin. He's a CEO and partner at McLaughlin & Associates polling firm. And plenty to talk about, whether it's New York voters opposing the Democrats' attempts to gerrymander congressional districts that are going to push out Republicans, or this breaking news that we have now with Tom Emmer being out of the nomination that he won hours ago, and now Mike Johnson being in. It's tough to keep our hands around this stuff, but let's bring in John McLaughlin. Welcome back, sir.
Hello. Great to be with you again. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. My pleasure. So, John, tell me, what do you make of this with respect to the speaker's race? It's here, it's there, it's all over the place. Emmer is out. Mike Johnson's just nominated about 15 or 20 minutes ago. What do you make of all this?
Well, until the Republicans nominate a new speaker or go back to Kevin McCarthy, whatever they choose, the only one winning right now is Hakeem Jeffries. And Hakeem Jeffries, when Pelosi was the speaker, she had very strong rules where the majority of their majority caucus ran the House. And she ran it to the point of, remember the January 6th committee they had? They didn't even allow Trump Republicans on the committee. They only had,
right,
two anti-Trump Republicans, and they had hearings, but the minority had no power. And so now they know that right now, Republicans are effectively probing Joe Biden's family finances, and they found millions of dollars of what looks like alleged bribes from foreign governments and foreign nationals, and checks to all sorts of family members and wires and LLCs, and that's really disturbing for the Democrats because if it's all true and all the discovery that they're finding, the president is compromised because he's been bribed, and so they want that shut down, and they also want to keep spending without any regard to inflation. They don't want to shut down the border where they have millions of illegal immigrants entering the country. They want to try to put cashless bail. They want to try to weaken democracy and weaken voter ID throughout the country. So they would really like to regain the House, and they're only 4 seats away from it. So if the Republicans don't agree on, who the new speaker is, the Democrats are in control. They're in the driver's seat. They're stifling our agenda. And the sad part is, like last month, because 7 out of 10 voters say the country's on the wrong track. They say the economy's getting worse, not better, 67-25. They don't like Bidenomics. It's a failure. And people are really distressed about a lot of things. And now you have international crisis where you've got a war in Ukraine that Biden can't stop. You now have our closest ally in the Middle East under siege from not just Hamas terrorists, but also from Iranian-backed Hezbollah and the threat of Iran entering the war, and they may have nuclear weapons. So the country's really, there's a lot of anxiety out there. Things are on the wrong track. The generic vote for the Republicans, they had in our last national poll, it was higher than the margin that they had in the last national popular vote, where the Republicans for Congress were leading the Democrats 48-41. And, Trump's leading Biden. In every published poll, Trump's leading Biden. In our last poll, he was leading Biden 47-43. If it was a three-way or 40 or four-way race, Trump was still winning. So the Democrats are desperate to get back into power. And I had a late friend, Pat Caddell, who was Jimmy Carter's pollster, who was a Democrat, who later advised President Trump. And Pat was great because he said the Democrats are the crooked party and the Republicans are the stupid party. And right now we're being stupid at a time where the country can't afford it. We need a speaker, and we need to push back with our own Republican agenda.
You know, John McLaughlin, that's it's great analysis, and I agree with you. If we don't get this thing figured out soon, there's only one winner, and it's the Democrats. I think you're 100% right with that. You also mentioned that our biggest ally, Israel, is facing the biggest fight they've faced in a long time, and the biggest death toll they've seen since the Holocaust. And this is one of those things where it makes you think. All of this stuff, in my opinion, to quote the late Bob Grant, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. And I think, Americans seem to be, based on other polls I've seen, sort of on board. They're like, okay, the terrorists are the bad guys. Israel's defending itself. But yet there's I forget which poll I'm looking at here, that says that there's the numbers are increasing for the support for Hamas. Have you seen any of these surveys?
Well, the one I saw over the weekend that I would give credibility to is the Harvard Harris poll that Mark
Harvard Harris, that's the one.
Yeah, right. And Mark is Hillary Clinton's old pollster, and he's very reputable, and he does a very good job scientifically when you look at the poll. And, and the reality of that poll is, and by the way, full disclosure, just like I work for Donald Trump, and we're working for the Trump 2024 campaign, I have worked since 2003 for Bibi Netanyahu in most of his elections. And last year, I was in Israel quite often as I was commuting back and forth between the United States and Israel during the elections. And I worked for Bibi, and Bibi was, they wanted Bibi back in there because the alternative was a government that included the Muslim Brotherhood Party in a coalition against him. And Israelis don't like the Muslim Brotherhood Party because they were funding, in effect, they knew that they were spending billions of dollars to the NGOs that were, in effect, funding terrorism. So that government collapsed. Bibi went back into office. And now, Bibi's there, and Americans look at his, Israel's enemies, and it's not just about Bibi, because Bibi in that Harvard Harris poll was 2-1 popular, 38-23, because he's the leader of Israel.
Right.
But Israel was favorable 59-21, and that's very similar numbers to what we've had in the past. But what you're talking about is the growing unfavorable, particularly with anti-Semitic Democrats. Right. Where it's in the Democratic Party, whether it's Ilhan Omar or whether it's Rashida Tlaib, they promote terrorism. You have Barack Obama himself, the former president, talking about
John, hold that thought so that I don't want to gloss over it. Folks, we're on with John McLaughlin. He's a partner at McLaughlin & Associates, polling firm. He represents Trump. He represents Netanyahu. And he's giving his insight on this Harvard Harris poll and why there's a growing number of 18 to 24-year-olds that believe that Hamas are the good guys. That's crazy. We're coming back to that and more. Don't move a muscle with John McLaughlin and me, Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with John McLaughlin, pollster, works with President Trump, works with the Netanyahu campaign, and we're discussing this Harvard Harris poll, and we're going to move on to some other topics, but I just wanted to put a pin in this part of it, where there's a growing number, 26% of the youngest age group, which was 18 to 24, believes the solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict should be ended and given Hamas all of Gaza is basically what they think should happen. And it's just insane to me that we have a pro-Hamas wing of the country, John McLaughlin.
Well, Hamas is a violent terrorist organization, and you can't have them on the border with Israel. It's just and they're enemies of the United States, and what the atrocities they committed in Israel. I mean, that's an act of war. And what's amazing is the United States here. You've got radical socialists who are rewriting history, who are trying to, because in their schools over there, they don't recognize Israel's right to exist among the Palestinians, and they have a map and there's no Israel on it. It's they just ignore thousands of years of biblical history, and they believe that the Jewish people have no right to their ancient homeland. So they through terrorism they want to wipe them out, and it's something that the civilized world, we can't let them do this, because if they can do this to Israel, that's just an hors d'oeuvre on their way to wiping out democracy and freedom in the United States. And it's what we saw happen in 9/11 in the United States, here in New York, where we lost friends and family. It's the same thing happening in Israel right now. And I know a lot of people over there, and Israel is under siege. And I don't think Americans would have ever stood for the kind of attack that just happened, to Israel. And for years now, they've been under rocket attack. That Iran provides these rockets to, Hamas terrorists. And crazy part is, Joe Biden rolled back the sanctions that Donald Trump had on Iran. Iran was going bankrupt, and he allowed the sanctions to roll back. He won't enforce them. That Iran going from selling a few $1 billion worth of oil a year to now $50 billion or so of oil every year. We're giving them billions of dollars for hostages. I mean, but Joe Biden is like Neville Chamberlain for the 21st century. I mean, it's unbelievable what he's doing to try to appease our enemies. And the dangerous part is he's trying to appease people who are totally, radical, that are our enemies, that are attacking American soldiers right now in Iraq and other places in the world. And, they could have nuclear weapons. So this is a really unique and scary time in our history that, when Donald Trump was there for 4 years, they wouldn't have done this. They were afraid of him. And when they tried to take our embassy in Baghdad, Trump sent in 3,000 soldiers to protect it. So Soleimani and the Quds Force from Iran weren't going to have a replay of what went on with Jimmy Carter and the United States, where they took our embassy in Tehran. We weren't going to let them do that in Baghdad. And their general, Soleimani, ended up, getting wiped out because he was going to launch an insurrection against the United States. So, if Joe Biden keeps on letting them shoot at our soldiers and our ships and attacking us, it's going to be open game on the United States by terrorists, and God knows how many terrorist cells and enemies have come over the open border since the Biden administration stopped enforcing and securing the border. So it's a dangerous time, and it's not just for Israel; it's for the United States. And what's scary is when you look at these polls, the fact that the anti-Israel opinion and the pro-terrorist opinion is being held by university-educated young Americans or young people in our country. It's a scary thing, because it's unpatriotic and it's anti-Semitic, and it really doesn't they don't share our values when they're teaching our young people this.
John McLaughlin, everything you've mentioned so far to me seems like it could have been avoided if Joe Biden would have, A, maintained the policies Trump left in place when he left, or B, just showed some semblance of leadership and strength. And it's the weakness that he's portraying that's affecting every area of this. You mentioned Bidenomics, you mentioned the border, you mentioned the fact that we have instability globally with the war in Ukraine, now the war in the Middle East, and of course there's always the constant tensions of a potential war between China and Taiwan. And I can't help but think, with all the polling you do, How do Americans weigh in on this? Are there numbers as to how badly Biden's doing? I know he just hit a new low last week, 58% disapproval rating, and it was even higher in certain areas like the economy. But is there anything more recent or anything else that we could look at that's measuring how badly Joe Biden's doing?
Well, there were polls this weekend. I mean, we had, before the debacle. And by the way, Donald Trump has been ahead in the national popular vote over Joe Biden since September of 21. And that was the moment when he surrendered Afghanistan, when he fled. And it was the first time in American history where a president actually surrendered a country to our enemy, to terrorist enemies. And, it was a green light to all our enemies, whether it was Putin and Russia to attack Ukraine, to Hamas and Iran to attack Israel. It's a green light for China, and fortunately Japan, I think, is trying to face down China. But, our allies in NATO and Europe are on their own. And Trump, when he was president, he tried to strengthen NATO by getting them to spend more. He tried to keep the world at peace by making sure our enemies, whether it was North Korea, whether it was Iran, whether it was Russia, they not only respected us, but they feared us. And it's a scary world when, the Pax Americana no longer stands. And the other part about the Biden administration is he's not just incompetent, he's corrupt. Where we have a president who's been compromised because him and his family have taken millions of dollars from Burisma to get a prosecutor fired. He's taken tens of $millions for the Biden Penn Center, where our Secretary of State was making $1 million a year. Our current Secretary of State, Blinken, was making $1 million a year running the Biden Penn Center at the University of Pennsylvania that China was funding. And, now, and by the way, the minute he got elected president, they shut the thing down because they know it's nothing but an influence scheme. And, he's compromised and he's corrupt. And it's come to the point where, just like they do in communist countries, he's trying to lock up his leading opponent because Donald Trump, when you talk about polls, Trump is leading in the average of national polls on the Real Clear Politics average, not my polls, but polls we never led in 2016 and 2020 because we were always going to win a battleground state electoral victory. But in these polls right now, Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in the national popular vote, which means he would win with an electoral landslide. And whether it was the Messenger Harris X poll where Trump's beating him today, 45-41, or whether it's and Trump was still beating him with Kennedy and West in the race, or the whole Real Clear Politics average when you're looking at Trump versus Biden. It's Trump up by a point nationally in the popular vote. And usually we underpoll in these polls because they're polls of registered voters, not likely voters.
Right.
But you had, the Harris poll that you had over the weekend, I mean, Trump was winning 52-48 with no undecideds. And the Emerson poll, 47-45. So, that's the report card on Joe Biden. And to me, it's like, those of us who remember Jimmy Carter, because I'd volunteered for Reagan in '76 to vote back then. I mean, Reagan, they said he was too old. He was too radical, would get us into a war, and he was too conservative. And, when Jimmy Carter failed, which took him 4 years, Reagan blew by him in October of 1980. Here you've got a situation where Trump's ahead of Biden right now, and Biden's trying to put Trump in jail. And he's got all his corrupt Democrat allies trying to, not just put him in jail, but they're also trying to bankrupt his business and his organization. So these are, very scary times because it's a real threat to democracy and it's a double standard of justice, what we've got going on here. So,
folks, we're on with John McLaughlin, and straight ahead we're going to talk about how New York voters are opposing the Democrats in their attempt to gerrymander congressional districts to thwart Republican candidates. And that's a poll that has just come out as well. So we're going to talk about that with John McLaughlin, pollster to President Trump and Netanyahu and many others. John McLaughlin, stick around. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
So, John McLaughlin, you've got a new poll that is showing how the group Stop New York Corruption has commissioned to measure the effects of gerrymandering. Tell us about that.
We did the poll in September 10th, and the numbers haven't changed. It was statewide poll, 600 likely voters in New York. And what's gone on is you realize that back in 21, we had won 3 statewide referendums where the Democrats tried to make amendments to New York State, the Constitution, and one of them was to change the redistricting commission. That was passed in a statewide referendum in 2014, where the state constitution basically says you can't have political gerrymanders in redistricting. You have to try to create competitive races, so what's gone on is last year the state's highest court, which was dominated by Andrew Cuomo appointees and Democrats, found that they were violating the state constitution, and it was a political gerrymander because the Democrats had rewritten the congressional seats to try to drive the Republicans down to 4 seats. So the top court threw it out. They appointed a special master to redraw the lines, which they did, and the seats were more competitive. So New Yorkers had their civil rights. They had their ability to vote in the election, and the Republicans won 11 seats, not 4, because the lines for different districts were made more competitive, and the Democrats, though, they didn't like that, so they're saying even though the state constitution says that these lines should be in effect for 10 years because of the census, they are trying to change the courts, and they're trying to, they're suing to basically have the lines redrawn this year, even though they were done last year. For next year's election, they want to have a new set of lines where they render the election less effective. So, or in basically to favor the Democrats. And what it was, when we asked them about it in the September survey, and the New York Post wrote about it, plus they'll have an editorial. They put up an editorial today where the headline is Kathy Hochul and Rowan Wilson's latest sleaze move to snub New York voters. There are now members of that court that one of them has recused herself, who was a more moderate. The second one, they forced out the Chief Justice, who had ordered, the special master to draw the lines, and not the legislature. So in this poll, which was done unbiased and published, and it's on the Stop New York Corruption, they put it out, and they shared it with the press. In New York State's highest courts, they rejected congressional districts approved by the Democratic legislature because they were partisan political gerrymander that was drawn to disadvantage competition and favor Democrats, end quote. The approver disapprover of redistricting by partisan political gerrymander. 10% approve, 72% of all New Yorkers disapprove. This is in a survey where half the voters are Democrat that represents a typical New York State election. There was no difference between Democrats and Republicans. 73% of Republicans disapprove, 70% of Democrats, 74% of independents. And then when we asked them, why they disapproved, they basically told us, 22% told us that it was politics. It was 20% said it was unfair, not fair, and 19% it was anti-democratic and fraud and crime, cheating and corruption were 16% of the responses. And when we asked them about does partisan political gerrymandering lead to more corruption, they said it does, 78-7. They basically said that partisan political gerrymandering takes away people's right to the civil right to choose their member of Congress in a competitive election. They agree with that 76-9. They basically, it gives the power of the party bosses to pick the candidates for Congress, 72-11, and 81% said it's flat out cheating. And so New Yorkers really disapprove of this, and they want competitive elections. and the Democrats are trying to sneak this through the courts without, it's not an amendment, because in the past there was the state legislature passed referendums to be on the ballot. And in 2014, you had a referendum approving of a redistricting commission that was supposed to be nonpartisan. In 21, it was reaffirmed on the ballot. And along with, they threw out same-day registration voting. They threw out, because there is no voter ID in New York on the day you go vote. They just take it for granted that it's you with your signature on a computer. And so New Yorkers, they really think there's fraud and corruption out there.
And the numbers are staggering. I mean, when you look at them, 72% reject the gerrymandering, 81% of voters viewed the partisan political aspect as cheating. I think that speaks volumes. When you have 600 likely voters that say, no, yeah, I think this is cheating. I think that's remarkable. Yeah, it's statewide, right?
And it's modeled after. But what's really important is, people want to decide. They want to decide the election. They want their vote to count. They want to go out in November, and the Republicans may not win all these seats again. The Democrats may win it, but at least have an election where you have a choice, where it's not prearranged that just one party's going to win and there's only maybe 4 competitive seats out of the 26. Now they've got. It's not just 11 districts, but there's 11 Republicans, but there's more seats that are competitive in New York. And if the Republicans don't get their act together, they'll lose seats. If the
hopefully when they get to Congress, they'll vote for the speaker, right, and not vote against whoever gets nominated, because we saw that happen with a handful of Republican congressmen in New York. John McLaughlin, I'm out of time on this one, but I want to thank you for being here. Let everybody know if they want to take a look at the poll, what your website is and how they can follow you.
They've put it's up on the website on McLaughlinonline.com. That's McLaughlinonline.com, and it's posted there. And it's the article. There was an article in the New York Post, and tomorrow we'll put up the New York Post editorial that they followed up this poll with. And if they want to follow me on Twitter or X or Truth Social, it's at JMCLGHLN. So.
Fantastic. Brother, I want to thank you for staying up late and breaking down all the numbers for us, because nobody does it like you do. John McLaughlin, everybody, you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I thank you, sir.
Well, I like listening, and I'm also in my office working right now. So it's a break from work. So
I appreciate it, brother.
Thank the voters, because they're the ones with these opinions. So I just report them. So thank you.
Good work. Folks, we're coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, we continue our conversation on masculinity. Is it toxic? Is it not? We're going to have a good conversation on that. I think that's always something that comes up. Being a kid born to parents that were born in Puerto Rico, I can tell you my dad was very macho. Matter of fact, that was my nickname growing up, macho. And of course, those are my pronouns. I identify as el macho. But seriously speaking, it's a cultural thing for many Hispanics for men to be manly. And when you hear the thought of toxic masculinity, it makes you think, why is my culture toxic? What did I do to you? Anyway, we're going to talk about that and a lot more. We're going to keep politics at the forefront and your calls and more. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't move a muscle. The show continues with me, Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. And I want to get into a couple of things tonight, but of course, some of the headlines that are out there. We've got Tom Emmer winning the Republican nomination for House Speaker, dropping out hours later. Now we've got Congressman Mike Johnson, who's won the nomination, and we'll go into the rounds of voting and see how that goes. So that's the latest on that. We'll keep you up to speed as to how that unfolds. Honestly, it's tough to give a play-by-play on this stuff because it's crazy. I also want to talk about what some of the folks that were held hostage in Gaza, what they revealed in some of the interviews that they've done. We're going to get to that in a moment. But I wanted to quickly talk about toxic masculinity because there's a piece today in publication womensagenda.com. Listen to the headline. The federal government launches a 3-year project to address toxic masculinity on social media. And it has a picture of the social media influencer, former kickboxing champion, Andrew Tate. And it says, the federal government announced this 3-year project to tackle the harmful messages of toxic masculinity on social media. Healthy Masculinity's Trial Project will receive $3.5 million to run both face-to-face and online presentations at schools, sporting clubs, and other community organizations to teach school-aged boys about respectful relationships, not just with their peers, but also with themselves. Now, the first question I have here is school-aged boys. Who gets to determine what a school-aged boy is? I thought we didn't do that anymore. And interesting. Anyway, starting with boys as young as 5 years old, the program aims to counteract dangerous gender stereotypes and messages of toxic masculinity that are circulated by online influencers like Andrew Tate. The funding is part of the $11.9 million First Action Plan Priorities Fund under the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children. So somehow being masculine, or what they like to call toxic masculinity, is somehow violence against women. The government hopes the 3-year trial program will foster healthy relationships, contributing to its goal to end violence against women in the next decade. Isn't that something? Now, listen, I'm not saying that we shouldn't aim or strive to limit, it's a nice thing to say eradicate, to eliminate. But the reality is, imagine if the government came out and said, we're going to start a 3-year program to end violence against humans. Wouldn't that sound silly? Do you think that spending $3.5 million through some Biden administration program would stop Hamas from bombing Israel? Do you think that spending $3.5 million would get the gangs in Chicago to stop shooting each other? Do you think it's going to stop the looting that's shutting down big box and other retailers in San Francisco, New York, and elsewhere? How do you stop violence against humans? The reality is you can't, right? You can teach your children to be kind. You can teach everybody to follow the law, to say, hey, look, I don't really care what you believe, but the reality is you can't go around hurting people. You can't commit violence, acts of violence against other people. Now, last I checked, that's actually the case, right? I mean, there's statutes locally, statewide, federally, right? There's laws everywhere that say you're not allowed to be violent against other people. Violence isn't condoned anywhere. So why is it that we bring in this notion of violence against women? Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be violence against women, or that there should, right? I don't think we should have violence against anybody. My point is, they word this and they couch it in this funny floral language where they say it's contributing to its goal to end violence against women in the next decade. How on earth will spending money? Now somebody out there is saying, come on, Rich, there's no way you're that thick, that you're that dense. No way. I don't think that's the case. I don't believe that we can try, and money can help to try to change the hearts and minds of people. And it's clear that's what the government wants to do. But the heart of a man, the heart of any human that wants to do bad things is very likely going to do those bad things because the law is there. And if we talk about natural law, the 10 Commandments, don't kill, don't steal, etc., those things are there. These are eternal truths. These are universal realities. Yet, it happens time and again because people become corrupted. Not everybody believes what you believe, and that's why we have laws. So whatever it is you believe, you still can't just act on your belief because there's rules, there's laws. There are boundaries in life that we have to adhere to. And I just think it's just fascinating to me that this is going on. And again, this is not just in the United States. This is happening in Australia and other places. And this particular story is out of Australia. So, and again, Australia is the place where they said, oh, we're going to end violence by getting rid of guns. And they haven't really gotten rid of guns. But anyway, the person that's in charge of this here is some minister of something or other. Let me see the Minister for Social Service, Amanda Rishworth, in Australia. She says the project is a significant step towards the nation's plan to end family and domestic violence. So they believe that you can end family and domestic violence by spending $3.5 million to say that Andrew Tate is a bad guy. And again, I'm not defending Andrew Tate. I'm just saying I think this is silly. And the reason I think the way I do, and maybe you agree with me, but maybe you don't, is because I once worked in government. And I remember working on a proposal for an anti-poverty program. And one of the phrases in one of the mission statements we'd created was to eradicate poverty. And I remember seeing it and going, oh, that seems noble. And then I remember the person that was in charge of the unit I worked in, he came to me and he said, that's pretty strong language, And I said, yeah, it seems like it. I said, it's a very noble goal. And he said, it's not a noble goal, it's stupid. And I said, it's stupid to end poverty? He said, no. He said, do you think you can end poverty? With a government program, do you think you can end poverty this way? And I of course, I said, no, I don't. And he said, then why would we try to sell that to the people? Why would we ever try to commit to something that we know isn't a real thing? Because it's not the government that creates the poverty in every case. People at different points in their life may live in poverty. Maybe while they're on the come up, working to their goal, maybe they had made it big and misspent their fortune. Maybe they never had anything to begin with. Individuals are individuals. They're just that. Everybody has a different path, a different lot in life. And it doesn't mean they can't turn it around. But to me, it does mean that you could try to teach people about financial literacy. You could try to teach young boys to be the best that they can be, young women to be the best that they can be. We should have all sorts of morality-infused education. But the idea that we're going to end violence against women by labeling masculinity as toxic, to me is a fool's errand. But listen to what she said. She said, research shows that there are strong links between harmful forms of masculinity and the perpetration of violence against women. Now, I would submit to you that I think masculinity could be many things, the way one acts, the way one thinks, the way one reacts, but none of it in any form of masculinity includes violence against women. That is not violence. That is not masculinity. It's violence. And again, violence against other men, violence against a dog, violence against women. And I'm not trying to eliminate women from the equation. I'm trying to highlight the unnecessary modification of words, toxic masculinity. It shouldn't be called that, right? I mean, let's see. What other situations do we do these types of word games with, where instead of saying you're a criminal, oh well, you're a toxically law-abiding citizen, right? It just doesn't. It's oxymoronic to think that way. But she goes on. She says, educating boys about healthy masculinity and providing them with positive role models are important steps to ending cycles of violence. And again, I don't disagree with the statement that if you teach kids not to beat their girlfriends and that if they saw their dad beating their mom, they shouldn't beat women. I think that's all fair game. But we shouldn't call that toxic masculinity. I think that this term is erroneous. And I reject it out of hand. She goes on to say, fostering respect in young men is a prerequisite to creating a safer future for our next generation. Well, absolutely. Fostering respect in young women does the same thing. And to put the focus on young men as if they're the sole perpetrator of violence ever, even if it's the majority of violence that's committed by men, I have no problem with people addressing boys and trying to teach them to be men. And if they called it, becoming a man, great. So to me, it's somewhat of a battle of semantics. But it's that same battle of semantics that gets into people's heads, where then they think that if you have some sort of bravado, if you are an outdoorsman, if you're not an outdoorsman, if you like to do this or conduct yourself a certain way, that somehow your mannerisms, behaviors, or way of being is in itself toxic. And that may be true for an individual. They may be a toxic person in many different ways. But I would submit to you again, I don't think it's their masculinity that is toxic. It is them themselves. And that's the problem. We try to make a bad guy a scapegoat out of everything, out of a situation, out of whatever. Recently, a friend of mine, I'm on a school board, and another friend of mine who's on a different school board tells me they had a conversation about, keeping drugs out of schools and whatnot. And the conversation led to, some people saying, well, we should definitely involve law enforcement if there's drugs on the school campus or whatnot. And others saying, no, we want to have the discretion to not call law enforcement. And the debate became, well, why wouldn't you? And the response was, well, because students of color have a disproportionately negative response to law enforcement. And when I heard that, I thought, that's an interesting thing because, hypothetically speaking, one would think that the safety of a child has nothing to do with the child's race. If there's a kid that's involved with substance abuse or distributing a substance or anything like that, it has nothing to do with their race. So why on earth would we take their race into consideration in considering the discretion that one would use for a consequence or a reaction? But this is where we are, because this wokeism, this anti-man, this anti-police rhetoric has entered so much of our culture. And here we are with the government of Australia and the Biden administration and others that are coming up with these crazy plans to thwart something that doesn't really exist by using something else that's probably just as fake and phony instead of addressing the real problem. Anyway, we'll continue that and your calls on these topics straight ahead. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're talking about toxic masculinity and how eliminating toxic masculinity will end violence. I want to get your thoughts on this and everything else we're talking about. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's see, where do we go? Let's start in Cleveland, Ohio, WNIR, and check in with Ethan. Go right ahead.
Hey, how's it going? How's your night been?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I've got a very controversial opinion on the topic of violence in general.
Sure.
I don't think humanity will ever become a peaceful species when religion and spirituality and ideology are still a thing in our culture.
Well, let me ask you this. And I'm not saying those could be sources of things, but I'm looking at the news today. Husband of woman shot in busy Chicago shopping district says shooting was road rage. Do you think that the road rage person shot this lady in a fit of rage because of religion?
No. Now, while I agree with you that not all violence is religion-based as well, I do not think that – I think it would be a good start, in my opinion, because of the differing of opinions and quite hostile differing of opinions that different religions can have against each other. It's a good start, in my opinion. Now, I understand that that won't ever happen, and I don't expect it to ever happen. But in order to reduce violence, you need to promote the understanding of others around you.
I agree with that. I think we have to be, there has to be a degree of tolerance that we have in life and respect for other people and respect for humankind, et cetera. And, you know, and you've prefaced your statement well by saying you don't think it'll happen. And the reality is, I don't think religion is not the source of those things. I would say in my time, I spent some time as a chaplain for a very busy police department, Newark, New Jersey. And I can tell you, as in the work that I did as a police chaplain, there was lots of violence, and zero of it in the years I did that had to do with religion. In fact, it was the religious community where imams and rabbis and Catholic priests and Christian ministers would get together and serve in this community of what they call the chaplain corps, and respond to these homicides and other shootings that occurred in Newark, and provide consolation to people and try to work with them and bring about peace. And oftentimes it was their efforts that brought about the biggest ceasefires in the city at the time that I was doing that. It's not religion in and of itself. It's an intolerance towards other people. Just like I might disagree with somebody on politics, I don't really ever want to pick up a gun and shoot them or beat them up or whatever it is. It's a disagreement, and there's plenty of disagreement, but you have to have an open mind about disagreement and say, look, you see things your way, I see things my way. So I agree with you, but I disagree with the premise that if we got rid of religion, I mean, you can't get rid of religion, and I think you said that. So that would not be the source. But I do think if we learn to be, the opposite might be true. If we all started to practice some tenets of a religion, you know, like loving God, loving people, love your fellow man, increase your level of forgiveness, I think we'd see a lot less violence that way. Ethan, thanks for the call. Coming right back, Rich Valdez.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations.
Thank you,
somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right?
That's
but
right.
You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, I want to continue our discussion regarding the House Speaker's race because, again, things have been unfolding very quickly with Tom Emmer winning the nomination. Then a little bit afterwards, a very stinging post from Truth Social from former President Trump comes out calling him a rhino, Republican in name only. And then he says he's out. And then all of a sudden, I don't know, probably about an hour ago now, we've got Mike Johnson, congressman from Louisiana, I believe, who's now got the nomination to go into the voting. And let's see how he fares. And I want to get into this topic because Again, I've never been married to it. I think it's great to have this process. I love to see the process working. At the same time, I love to see a House that's functioning as well with a speaker where we can take action. And as the world is burning around us and Europe is ablaze with Ukraine and Russia and Hamas is attacking Israel, it would be nice to know that the Americans kind of have their ducks in a row and we can move forward. And that isn't the case right now. So, of course, the timing is never really good on these things. But I want to get into this with the Associate Professor of Political Science at Tarleton State University, Dr. Nathaniel Cogley. Welcome, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rich. Appreciate it.
You bet. So what's your take on what's going on as this begins to change very rapidly with the House Speaker's race?
Well, it's fun to watch. When you asked me to do the show tonight, it was all about Tom Emmer, and now it's all about Mike Johnson. So, everything keeps moving. Republicans only have 221. There's not much space there to lose votes. And, this is like Goldilocks. She comes in for the porridge. Can't be too hot, can't be too cold. It's got to be just right. And if we look at the Liberty scores done by Conservative Review on some of the people that have been put up prior, Kevin McCarthy's got a 54% F. And certainly we see some America First conservatives not happy with how he was handling the speakership. Steve Scalise, who was put up next, also has an F at 58%. Now, Jim Jordan was then thrown up there, and he's got an A, 94%. So, someone like me who actually wants to get this $1.7 trillion deficit under control is happy with the Jim Jordan, but he just might be too fiscally conservative for this House of Representatives.
Right.
He withdrew Tom Emmer with a D, and, of course, upsetting President Trump there, trying to overplay his relationship with President Trump, and President Trump outwhipped the whip on that one, and Emmer had to drop out, but he's got the D. But here we go, Mike Johnson. This is a little more right in the middle. This is a little more not too hot, not too cold, not too conservative, but still conservative, So Mike Johnson's got a C at 74%. That's kind of about where you're going to need to be if you're going to bridge this two wings of the party together, the America First conservatives, along with the big spending Republicans that are still part of our party. And you got to kind of bridge that together. Mike Johnson has already got more votes for the nomination than Scalise, Jim Jordan, Tom Emmer. He's got more than all of them. He got 128 in this conference nomination vote, whereas Emmer had 117, Scalise had 113, and Jordan had 124. So he's already getting close. He's not a lock. This is still an uphill battle to bring these wings together. But I do think Mike Johnson or someone like him who's positioned in the middle. Roger Williams is also in this new mix of five. He also has a C rating. I'm actually in Roger Williams' district here. So I do think there's going to be someone to emerge here. This is just going to take time. And the closer this goes on and we get to November 17th, where the continuing resolution runs to, the more pressure on the big, the deficit spenders to come up with something, because they're going to need a speaker if they want to keep spending.
Yeah, 100%. And this is something Bob Good often said, was that, you need pressure. You need pressure to score a good deal, because without the pressure, you don't really get where you got to go. Now, I'm with you in theory that you need somebody who everybody can agree on. However, I just feel like when you do that, you automatically alienate a lot of the other guys that have an A score. Matt Gaetz famously said anybody but McCarthy, and I think he's kind of stuck to his guns on that he hasn't really opposed anybody yet. But I see, right. I would sense that once the voting starts for tomorrow, or whenever the next vote is going to be, and they actually do the first round of votes on that first ballot or the next ballot, I foresee some people standing up and I nominate Mickey Mouse, I nominate Trump, I nominate McCarthy, and diluting. And when you only have 4 for the win, right? They need 217 to win. You have that buffer of 4 that you can lose, and you get people throwing out these nominations for anybody but the person that they're trying to agree on. I feel like we're going to have a repeat of this. And ultimately, my prediction is that Mike Johnson doesn't make it. I hope I'm wrong, honestly, just for the sake of the country, that we can move forward. But I also think for the sake of the country, we need to move forward with the right person. If you had a crystal ball, what would you say happens with Mike Johnson once he goes in for the votes?
Well, he's got a better shot than the previous ones. Now, he actually doesn't need 217, so I see that repeated all over the place. He needs a majority of the votes cast. So Democrats keep delivering 212 for Jeffries. He actually only needs 213 to have a majority vote, as long as 8 vote present, right? So there's a little bit of wiggle room there that as long as some Republican members don't vote for anyone at all, then that doesn't factor into the threshold needed here. So, I mean, if everyone's voting for someone, then he can only lose 4 to someone else. But if you got 8 willing to vote present, he only actually needs 213. And you actually saw Gates and some others in the first round end up voting present rather than vote for McCarthy at all. So there is going to be some space here. It's certainly an uphill battle, but someone like Johnson is just better positioned to maybe try to bridge the wings of the party, or someone like him. I mean, they're not limited to him. There's quite a few names that might work. I just feel like this is going to get resolved, sooner than later. And you see that when they lock into someone, you end up going through a lot more rounds than Jordan only went through 3 rounds, right? And Scalise and Emmer backed out before any rounds on the floor. When you had this in 1923, they went 9 rounds to push through the speaker back then, and McCarthy went 15 rounds, right? So once you get close and you got like a dozen holdouts, and you need to negotiate with them, make concessions, but you can lock in and throw a dozen rounds together, and the precedent would be you do get someone through. But Mike Johnson would be an improvement for some people over McCarthy. So you'd have to look at this as maybe improving the situation in the speaker slot. But, fiscal conservatives, they're not new to being disappointed in D.C. So, disappointment is also a precedent if you're trying to get a $1.7 trillion deficit under control. So I've been disappointed before, so it wouldn't surprise me if we're disappointed again.
You and me both. Now, Professor, what's your take on the Trump factor? Do you think that Emmer bailed out because of Trump? It seems to me like it was certainly the case, but not necessarily so, right? Scalise also did it. Do you think it was backroom conversations? Do you think it was Trump's statement saying, don't overplay your hand, I don't really know you that well? What say you?
Yeah, remember McCarthy barely got through 15 rounds, and he had Trump's endorsement. So for you to get these fiscally conservative reps on board someone that they don't trust and someone that's going to put forward suspending the debt ceiling and continuing resolutions and the omnibuses, it helped McCarthy that he had Trump's endorsement. Emmer never had it. And Emmer, Trump very clearly came out. At first, he was rather neutral, and then he came out very clearly against Emmer, and that was the end of Emmer. He had no shot once Trump pulled the support. There's a lot of reps willing to support Trump on that. So, Trump is the likely nominee for 2024. He's the person fighting in the arena for a citizen agenda in this country, and I think someone is going to need his support if they want to get to this at least 213 votes with 8 present, or 217 with everyone voting. You're going to need Trump behind that.
I agree with you on that one. All right, folks, we're on with Dr. Nathaniel Cogley. He's an associate professor of political science at Tarleton State University. And Professor, I'm going to take a quick pause right here. I want to come back and throw a few different headlines at you in the political world to get your reaction to them. So stick with us. Folks, if you have a question you'd like to pick the professor's brain, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back, familia. Well, the Republicans are on Capitol Hill, and they're duking it out for the speakership. There's still the looming question of what is going on with Joe Biden, who I like to call Joe El Baboso Biden. And there's a bunch of polling that's out that's not good. Just on Friday, I read a poll, 58% disapproval, record-breaking. Then there's another one today, Siena College. That was the CNBC survey. Then you got Siena College here, 52% unfavorable. Then there's a third one here with the latest migrant poll, which says where Democrats are saying the illegal immigration is going to destroy the city of New York. And this is in the New York Daily News, the New York Post. 84% of New Yorkers say that the state's migrant mess is a serious problem. And that's a high number. I don't think I've ever seen something that high on a poll like this. So I want to dig into that a little bit. Overall, Biden's unfavorability with Dr. Nathaniel Cogley. He's associate professor of political science at Tarleton State University. Professor, what do you make of everything that's happening with Biden? He seems to think he's doing fantastic every time he's out there, and all the polls seem to suggest the opposite.
Yeah, some polls I was looking at a couple weeks ago, there's scandals with Hunter Biden and all that things, but really Biden's age, his frailty is really starting to resonate with just average voters who maybe casually pay attention to politics. And even in the Democratic Party, many Democrats think he's too old. And if they don't say it's age exactly, they say something related to it, his competence, his energy, something as his kind of his job performance abilities decline. So he's got, and that problem isn't going to address itself. It's going to continue to get worse here. So I do think they do have a real problem here in terms of the Biden candidacy. Kamala Harris has also never polled well as a presidential candidate. And so, the Democrats certainly have a challenge here going forward in terms of putting a viable, robust ticket together. But I'm sure President Biden doesn't see it that way. I think he thinks he's the man for the job. So he's continuing to run, and he's running until he's not. Age gives him a good reason to back out at some point, and he doesn't even need to serve the 4 years. As long as he wins, they lock in the 4 years, regardless of whether or not it's him to complete it. But they definitely have an electability issue here with Joe Biden that's not going to resolve itself. The age factor is going to get worse. Combine that with the scandals and the inflation, and he's got an electability challenge. For sure.
Now, when I look at this, and you cited a few things that I think are really good points. Should and again, this is some analysis here, hypotheticals. Do you think if he doesn't run again, it's just him saying, "Hey, look, I'm not running anymore," and he decides to, I'm going to spend more time with Hunter? Or is it something like, Hunter needs me? Or is it something like, we're going to go to the convention and there'll be a contested convention? How do you think it plays out?
Oh, if Joe Biden wants to exit this race, age and health give him a good out. I mean, it may be legit too. I mean, Biden is over 80, he's 81. He's going to get older from here. And there could be a legit health reason where he just can't do it anymore. But it wouldn't be hard to identify a reason if he was looking for one. And there's still time on the Democratic side to pull together a nominee. They certainly have, senators and governors and all sorts of things to work through. And Kamala Harris is vice president. But, the sooner the better. But he's in it until he's not. It just wouldn't totally 100% surprise me if he pulls out here at some point. And I think in 2020, the powers that be in the Democratic Party weren't originally on board, but at some point they thought he was the best vehicle, and they drove him into this term. But some of them are probably wondering if he is indeed the best vehicle this time, and certainly Joe Biden thinks he's the best vehicle. But I bet there's some second guessing behind the scenes.
All right, Professor Nathaniel Cogley, hang on one more break with us. There's an article in The Hill says Biden won't file for the New Hampshire Democrat primary. I want to get your take on that. And before we wrap it up straight ahead, folks, we're on with Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, professor of political science, and we're coming right back. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our conversation as we wrap up with Professor Nathaniel Cogley. And, Professor, I want to bring your attention to this. It's an article in The Hill. Biden won't file for New Hampshire Democrat primary, citing rules from the DNC saying they do not want to place candidates' names on the ballot, whatever that means. It sounds like they're rewriting the rules for the 2024 Democrat nomination to make it, I guess, easier for Biden to run. From what I can surmise, what are your thoughts? Is this a signal that Biden's definitely pulling out?
Well, we have a tradition where Iowa was the first caucus and New Hampshire was the first primary, and certainly those states liked being first in these presidential nomination contests. If you remember back in 2020 cycle, Biden lost Iowa and then he lost New Hampshire. Pete Buttigieg actually won both of those. And then Biden did not win the Nevada caucus as well. And the first state that Biden won was South Carolina. Representative Clyburn helped him win that. And then you saw everything coming together for Biden right before Super Tuesday. Now, what's interesting here is Biden himself has proposed to drop New Hampshire as the first primary and to make South Carolina, a state he won, the first. And maybe South Carolina likes that, but certainly New Hampshire feels like they should be first. And New Hampshire actually has a clause in their state constitution that they have to be first and they have to be a week before any others. So here's the state of New Hampshire saying, no, you're not going to bump us down the schedule. We're going to go a week ahead of South Carolina, whatever that is. And the Democratic Party is telling New Hampshire, well, we just might not count your delegates. And so Biden seems to be holding that line pretty hard with New Hampshire. It's just kind of curious how this will play in New Hampshire, which, wasn't that close, around 7%, but it's close enough to pay attention to, and it's for electoral votes. So will the Democrats snubbing New Hampshire in the calendar cycle for the primaries actually affect them in the general? I'm curious to pay attention and find out.
Me too. Professor Nathaniel Cogley, thanks for being with us. We appreciate your insight. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I appreciate you staying up late with us.
Thanks so much, Rich.
You bet. Godspeed to you, sir. All right, folks, Open Phone America is coming up right now. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Our telephone number, if you want to join us in this third hour of the program this Tuesday night, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez is the phone number. And we've talked about the speaker's race. We've talked about the polling problems that Biden has. We've talked about the polling prowess that Trump has. We've talked about the conflict in Gaza. We've talked about so much that's been out there. And, of course, anything that you want to bring to the table, because, of course, this is your hour to sound off. Open Phone America, a time-honored tradition here on this program. And, again, that dates back to 1978, the days of Larry King, maintained by Jim Bohannon, the late, great Jim Bohannon, for 3 decades. And we're going to do the same thing here together tonight. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. And I want to get into a couple of calls. Of course, we also talked about Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden seems to be faced with the question, should he stay? Should he go? The polling doesn't look good for him. It reminds me of that old song. I think it's by The Clash. That's right. I think Joe Biden's asking America, darling, you got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go? I don't know if Joe Biden's doing that or not, but he should be. And I want to get you guys to weigh in on that. I'm going to jump right into the phones tonight because I know there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions. And yesterday evening, I put out an APB on a longtime caller of this program. His name is Gil from Manila, Philippines, because I hadn't heard from him in a while. And we have located him. The deep state did not get him. Gil from Manila, Philippines is alive and well. Gil, welcome back, sir.
Hello. Long time we don't talk.
Yes, sir.
I've been a sick puppy. I was in the hospital for over 3 weeks, and I'm recuperating now, and I'm starting to get my health back.
Good. Thank
I
God.
have to use a walker, and when I go out, I'm confined to a wheelchair, but I'm getting better. But that's not why I called.
You know what's getting you through that, Gil? Your toxic masculinity. That's what's getting you through.
Well, I don't know about toxic masculinity, but if Robert Kennedy Jr. runs, he's talking about running as an independent, as another party. That would just about guarantee a Republican victory in our next presidential election.
Sounds good to me.
What old man's thoughts.
I tend to agree with you.
And you had a guest on last week, a nice lady who was an expert on finding your perfect long-term relationship on the internet.
Oh, yes, a matchmaker and dating and relationship coach, Jennifer Stiers.
Right. Well, I'm an old guy, and having had lots of relationships, I would recommend, if I were a 45-year-old guy, like someone we know, I'd find someone here, because the women here are different. In this country, there's no divorce. You're married for life. You may become estranged and not live together, but you're legally married until you die. And this is the only country in the world that's like that, except for the Vatican. So women here have a different attitude when they get married. They think it's forever. And if I were looking for the perfect mate, I'd try to find an optometrist, because you can bring an optometrist from here and pass the state exam. They could go to work in the United States and have a good daytime job, because, most medical professionals have crazy hours, but not the optometrists. They work 9 to 5 or 9 to 7, and they have plenty of time off to enjoy with their partner. That's what I would do if I were 45 living in the United States.
Well, it's not a bad idea. On that show, I was mentioning that I've been dating a girl for a few months. I like her a lot. And she would pass for a Filipino. She kind of looks Asian. But I'll say this. If it ever comes to the point of proposal, I'm going to have a destination wedding, and I'm going to get married in the Philippines to make sure we're nipping this thing in the bud. How's that sound, Gil?
Well, that sounds good, but the thing is, the law only applies here. If you both live in the States, you can, of course, get a divorce. But if you live here, you can't.
Ah, I see. There's a caveat there. Now, let me ask you, Gil, moving on from dating and relationships and everything else we've been discussing, what are your thoughts on Biden? Does Biden make it? Does he run in 2024? Does he bail out before? Does he face off against Trump or whoever the Republican is, which I believe is going to be Trump? What say you?
I think Dr. Jill Biden ought to have a nice talk with her husband and say, maybe it's time to call it quits and see who the Democrats want to nominate for a presidential candidate. I don't think it's going to be Vice President Harris.
Kamala Harris. It's not going to be her.
Yeah, Kamala Harris. But she was almost insurance that he would never be impeached. Because people were afraid what she would be as president. So it's going to be an interesting next 16 months.
For sure. I'm going on 20 years of observing politics, and I got to tell you, this is one of the most interesting presidential elections I've seen to date. Gil, thank you for the call. You're one of my favorite old-timers. Great to hear from you. I wish you nothing but the best. And I agree with you that Jill Biden should have a conversation with Joe Biden. And I also think that Jill Biden should maybe find herself a Filipino optometrist that can help her see things a little better, because I think she doesn't see things straight to begin with. Gil, you're a gentleman and a scholar. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you very much.
You bet. All right, folks, we continue with the rest of your calls and more. We've got calls from Wilmington, Delaware, Evergreen, Montana, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and more coming in right now. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Level of concern right now about the potential rise of anti-Semitism in light of everything that's going on in Israel?
So a couple of things. We have not seen any credible threats. I know there's been always questions about credible threats, and so just want to make sure that that's out there. But look, Muslim and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks, and certainly President Biden understands that many of our Muslim, Arab Americans and Palestinian American loved ones and neighbors are worried about the hate being directed at their communities.
As if there were a proportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. The things that people say, I really feel like people don't think before they speak. I get what she's saying, but really, a disproportionate number. I mean, should there be a proportionate number? What's the right amount of number? What's the right amount of hate-fueled attacks, KJP? And she didn't stop there. When they asked her, they pressed her a little bit more on anti-Semitism, and she just dodges the question. Check this out.
I know John Kirby addressed the protests on college campuses, and I appreciate that the president respects First Amendment rights to protest, but does the president view anti-Israel protests and sentiment on college campuses as as anti-Semitism?
So look, I'm not going to get into what's happening across the country and at different universities. Not going to get into the specifics. As the Admiral said, the First Amendment right? That's what something, peaceful protest is really part of our democracy, being able for folks to be able to express their feelings. I'm not going to get into any specifics on that. The president has been very clear in wanting to make sure that Jewish Americans, wanting to make sure that Arab Americans, Muslims are protected here.
So that's KJP again, just dancing around the questions when it comes to anti-Semitism and whatnot. And I don't expect more from her, but it's not a good look at all. Anyway, I'm going to get to your calls. Let's go to Brooklyn, New York, listening WFAS. Let's check in with Alex. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, I wanted to comment about that cut because now today she said she didn't understand the question. She didn't really hear what the question was. But I don't get what she, didn't hear. I mean, if she didn't know what the question was at all about, she should have said, what are you saying? But the person that asked the question said anti-Semitism straight there. And so she should have responded to the anti-Semitism. And I think at the beginning she was, because she said there are no credible threats. And I think that was her trying to downplay what, the anti-Semitic situation we have here in this country. Sure. And I think that's what was going on. But then she tried to switch it over to saying that we do have a problem with, Muslims in this country being threatened. And she did that with the other question that you also played, where she was again asked, about anti-Semitism on the college campuses. And she made sure to, say equalize the, danger that Muslims have here in the country to what Jews have here in the country. And, I think in this current circumstance, it's a totally different ballgame, the kind of hatred Jews are getting here, the spike of anti-Semitism you're seeing in colleges. You don't really see very much hate in the United States over these last few weeks against Muslims. I don't think you should see, but you see it against Jews, and it doesn't seem like she's very interested in defending them. You just look at the numbers, 51% of hate crimes here in this country are, against Jews, 10% are against Muslims. But I guess she didn't want to understand the question because maybe she's also pro-Hamas, maybe.
Yeah, well, and this is my thinking. Clearly, we're looking at a situation right now in real time, October 7th, this attack on Jews, attack on the state of Israel. And that's what everybody's talking about, right? They're not talking about just general things that are happening in happenstance or the attacks against Muslims or those perceived to be Muslim in the wake of the 9/11 attacks 20 some odd years ago, right? And those things happened. But today, as it stands now, people that are Jewish were slaughtered in a gruesome fashion. Houses torched, babies torched, beheaded. And to be so flippant in her comments and to respond with, it's Muslims that are receiving a disproportionate amount of hate-fueled attacks, I think is one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And it doesn't mean that there's no violence against Muslims. It just means that, A, as I mentioned before, what is the appropriate number of hate-fueled attacks? And B, how do you ignore the elephant in the room when we're clearly talking about the attack from Hamas on Israel? I think it's just it's not just semantics. It's her literally obfuscating the question, dancing around it, and not trying to answer it. Lamentably.
Yep, and she usually reads off the notebook that she has there with the question answers, or she says ask somebody else because that's not her job. She's not the press secretary at certain points in time, so she doesn't want to answer the question. But she should have just read it from the notebook. It says there that there's possible threats of anti-Semitism, and there's a lot of hatred in the college campuses against Jews, and she could have just read it from the notebook. But she was so determined, I guess, to make this about Muslims as opposed to Jews, and it kind of shows really where she stands. And I don't know, because she usually isn't so direct in answering a question, and especially when she's making it up like that and flipping things around. She usually reads off the notebook, but she deliberately did not do that here.
Yeah, good point. Thanks for the call, brother. Thanks. Alex, good talking to you like always. Let's continue here. I want to go to, let me see. where did my screen go? Here it is. Let's go to Dan, Chicago, listening on WGN. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you. I was listening yesterday to the interview with Joe Gilbert, who made the film regarding Michelle Obama. And he was portrayed as this deep guy who does all the analysis. I'm not the biggest Michelle fan, but right off the bat, and his interview was full of inaccuracies. And I don't even know her background that well, but living in Chicago.
Well, let's take them one by one. I'm no expert on Michelle Obama either, but what part of it was inaccurate?
Well, here's the first one. It may sound minor, but it really caught me when he said, well, she didn't really live in Chicago. She lived in this Lake Michigan community of South Shore. Well, he's right. She lived in South Shore, but anybody who's done more than 1 minute's worth of research knows that South Shore is a community well within the city of Chicago. Now, that may seem minor, but that kind of set the tone. Then he went on to say, so that's the first one. Another one, he made it sound like she had this silver spoon in her mouth. I don't know if you or your listeners know her background that well, but her father worked for the water department in Chicago. That's not exactly a silver spoon. And partly she knew Jesse Jackson's family because she went to school with Jesse Jackson's daughter. And then going on, he made it sound like she had a big part of Cabrini Green being knocked down. Cabrini Green, for your listeners, was public housing that had been debated for many years that it was really a dangerous area. And it wasn't good for the residents, and it was hotly debated. I'll leave it at that. And
all right, good points. The music means I have to go. Thank you for your input. Again, I wouldn't know one way or the other if she was born with a silver spoon or not. I can only judge her by what she said and what she's done, and that's enough for me to know that I don't want her being president. But thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Keep the calls coming in. We're going to get to the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. It's Open Phone America, and we're coming right back. All right, America, welcome back. We've got lots of calls, and we're going to get to all of you right now. I want to just remind you, we're talking about should Biden stay, should Biden go, what's going on with the latest in the Middle East, and is masculinity toxic? I don't think so, but we're going to get into that right now. Let's see, where do we go now? We go to Linda, Albany, New York, WGDJ. Go right ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Go right ahead.
Okay. Thanks for taking my call, and thank you for trying to get the truth of things out. I can believe it when so many college students have been so duped as to doing all these demonstrations on behalf of the terrorists. It's just so shocking and scary.
Yeah, I agree with you, Linda. It is scary, and it was interesting. We talked about that earlier with John McLaughlin, the pollster, and looking at the there's a Harvard-Harris poll that showed that a growing number of 18 to 24-year-olds and the, I think, 5,000 people or 6,000 people that they interviewed for that poll felt that it was okay for Hamas to attack Israel the way that they did because of a dispute over land or whatever their dispute was over. And to me, I'm thinking you could fight about a lot of things, and I'm not disputing why they should fight. I don't think they should fight, but they're fighting, and that's that. But I don't think you should go and burn down, little children, right? Their homes and burn them as well. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. And I don't see how we can sanction that. Right? How does anybody sign off on that type of warfare? It's beyond me. Great point, Linda. Big shout out to everybody in Albany, New York, WGDJ. Let us continue. Where do I want to go? Let's go to Doc, Wilmington, Delaware, WDEL. Doc, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Rich, thanks again for a great show, buddy. Couple comments, three comments on three topics real quickly, and then I'll be quiet and let your other guests talk. I don't think Joe Biden is going to be the nominee for one reason. You're a New Yorker, born and bred. You know John Katsimatidis, I believe his name is, who has the show on one of your major stations, Cats at 9 or Cats at 10. A couple of years ago in the New York Post, I read an article about him. I get him on the radio down here in Delaware. I listen to him all the time. He had Ed Rendell, former governor of Pennsylvania, on his show. Ed Rendell said at that time the ticket would be that Joe Biden would drop out. He said the ticket would be, and I agree with this, Hillary Clinton at the top, but VP Michelle Obama. That would be the ticket in 2024, and I agree with that. I think that's the way the Democrats want to go. They're going to give somebody on Wall Street will give Joe and Kamala a golden package, and they'll roll into the sunset. Second point, second and third points. You had a couple of factual errors last night on your show. Miss Gabriel is a wonderful caller, and I have her book about her life. It's fantastic. But she's wrong about who blew up our barracks in Beirut. That was done by Force 17, Yasser Arafat's personal bodyguard force, who do terror attacks for him when they were in the PLO and assassinations and sabotage. Force 17 did that. Hezbollah didn't do it because Hezbollah is loath to take on the United States directly. Lastly, Jimmy, whom I love as a caller, but he's off to all this communist stuff. The Russians are allied with the Iranians right now as a matter of convenience. But you got to remember the Savak under the Shah was a terrible torture agency, his intelligence force. They wiped out the Communist Party in Iran. What was left of it was wiped out by the mullahs now. The mullahs are running it, and they are allied with the Russians, but they're in with the Arab oil states, and our people that we say are our friends, particularly Rich, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan are playing a double game. That's the facts.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Jimmy's comments were guided more towards the Marxist philosophy that and tactics that they use. And with regard to Brigitte Gabriel, I think she mentioned that it was Fatah that was the precursor to Hezbollah that claimed responsibility, but ultimately I think our country, not just her, has acknowledged historically, like State Department websites and whatnot, all mention Hezbollah, or Hezbollah rather, as the culprit. And again, I'm not saying that you're wrong or not. I'm just saying that's what the history that I was able to find indicates. And I don't disagree with you. I have no reason to believe that 417 special ops commandos that worked for the PLO were not, in fact, double dipping as Hezbollah in that attack, and or calling themselves Islamic Jihad or whatever it was. So yeah, interesting. I think a distinction without much of a major difference to a layman like me. But I appreciate your call nonetheless, Doc. Thank you for always listening and for your kind words. Very much appreciated. Let us continue. Let's go to Bedford, Indiana, WBIW, and check in with Sarah. Sarah, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hey, great talk to you. I want to preface this by saying this is not my mindset. I'm going to try to explain the left-wing mindset in how everybody is so surprised that they've turned a blind eye to the anti-Semitism. The thing is, with the modern left, while the traditional left used to support American Jews and help them combat and be sympathetic in the fight against anti-Semitism, you realize the modern left is thoroughly racist. Okay, white people are at the bottom, unless you're leftist, then you're okay. But they have this little caste system that they have. So if Jews get attacked by a white person, then that's anti-Semitism. It's horrible. But if the attackers are non-white, then they got to consult their little codex. And now that we have a large number of Muslim diaspora from various countries who are not white, suddenly it's okay. And in fact, this is my personal opinion that the left is going to throw the Jews under the bus in favor of the anti-Semitic Muslims because they want to pander, they want to cater to those people. So suddenly that's why you're seeing them downplay the horrible atrocities which occurred on the attack in Israel. Like I say, it's not what I think is right, but you have to understand the mindset of the left.
Right, the intersectional left. I get exactly what you're saying. And I think it's a very interesting point because while there's competing interests, right? So, I mean, we saw earlier this year, we saw various Muslim communities rising up against the radical far left, the progressive left, with their push for the LGBTQ movement and the hypersexualization of middle school and other K through 3 curriculums and whatnot. And that's not in alignment with a group of people that are very conservative because they're religious conservatives, the Muslims. And it's interesting because they're going to be at wit's end, right? So they have this agreement on where there may be agreement on the Palestine issue, but there's disagreements on other issues. And it's an interesting conundrum to see how that's going to play out. But this goes back to a lot of what Jimmy from Brooklyn, the caller, had mentioned, is that this is the Marxist playbook, right? The idea is to divide and conquer, to take every group you can and get them to turn against each other one way or another way. Even if there is a wedge issue that may bring them together at some point, ultimately you just keep wedging. You keep wedging to break them up so that you have factions against factions. This is how they manage. If the people are in turmoil, the government is the solution. And then you hail to the altar of government, the answer and provider, the end all, the be all, and this is the Marxist way. So I think you're spot on in your commentary, and I think that's truly the crux of it. And even what Doc was just saying, same thing, right? Well, it's not so much about this one being right or that one being wrong, in so much as just following the philosophy of the Marxists to get turmoil. And that's all they do. Years ago, I read a series of articles, big articles, like 50, 60-page articles, like, scholarly pieces that discussed why the radicals use fire. Like why, the ongoing joke from May of 2020, fiery but peaceful, right? The reporters saying it's a mostly peaceful protest. I think it was Ari Melber from MSNBC, and the buildings were burning to the ground behind him. And the question of all of that is that the fire creates confusion and chaos. And that is literally the Marxist playbook. They want to create chaos. They want to create division, and they want to burn everything to the ground so they can come in and kind of bring it all together in the name of whatever they're pushing, which oftentimes is some sort of universal government system that brings everybody together. I guess capitalism says a rising tide lifts all boats, and communism is like a burning building brings everybody down to the same level. We could all be broke together, minus the oligarchs. So great assessment, Sarah. Thank you for your call. Folks, I'm going to pause right here, coming back to your calls from North Carolina, Missouri, Michigan, Montana, Pittsburgh, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, let's go to Bill in Jefferson City, Missouri, KTTR. Bill, welcome.
Listened to several people discuss Michelle Obama and the Democratic convention that comes to Chicago in 2024 in the summertime, and I got thinking of Harry Truman and how he ascended into at the convention. So lots of funny things can happen at the convention, and I'm thinking, I hope the Republicans are prepared. The new Speaker of the House, whoever he is, can give us something that can keep Michelle from doing what she is such a schemer at doing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've been hearing it for a long time. I mean, in the last election, I heard, no, it's not going to be Biden. It's going to be Obama. They're going to pull a switcheroo at the end. I do believe something that Mr. Gilbert mentioned last night was true. I do believe Michelle Obama would be a formidable candidate for the Democrats to run. I really do believe that. And his opinion was very different from mine. Mine was the Obamas are living life. They get to talk about politics whenever they feel like talking about it, but they could make money like private people in the private sector, which you can't necessarily do when you're in the White House because of, all sorts of, ethics and blah, 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 and all of that. But he believes that they're political animals and they want to be involved in government directly. I believe they want to be involved and influence government indirectly because they can make movies and $100 million deals and all of these things. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's my own naivete. I don't know. But I think you're right. I think that we're going to see a very interesting thing with the convention in Chicago. Why not? Perfect time to say, we're going to do this again. We're going to do Obama again, this time with a woman. And I think that's a powerful message for a lot of people that are left-leaning. And Michelle Obama versus Trump sounds like a fight that I'd watch on pay-per-view, right? Definitely. I'm not looking to see Trump-Biden again. I've seen that fight already. I've seen Trump-Clinton already. So I think that is an interesting fight. And Trump-Harris, that would just be abuse. Bill, great call. Excellent insight there. I appreciate that. Let's continue. Let's go to Matt, Morehead City, North Carolina, 80 miles north. Go right ahead.
Hello, Rich. Excellent memory you have. I woke up just in time for your show.
Buenos dias.
Amazing. I just had a little nap. But anyway, I wanted to say, like I told Tom, your call screener, John McLaughlin was very informative, number one. Quick points there. And number two, Jill from the Philippines, they cut off the beginning of the conversation, this local channel. But then it was very good and entertaining. And number three, I, amongst millions of Americans, are tired of Biden bankrupting this country. I bought a can of starting fluid. It was $3.39 last year. Monday it was $6.
Yeah. And people, anybody who thinks that you're overstating things, when you go shopping and you're paying double for a product and you buy 10 products and they're all double, you can't say inflation's going down, right? You could say whatever you want. It's affecting my pocket in a different way. And I've got to tell you, I mean, the only thing I've seen gone down since that time where we had that big chicken fiasco was the price of chicken. That went up really high and kind of normalized. But outside of that, I'm still spending a bunch of money on gasoline when I fill up my truck. And again, I'm not complaining that I'm spending. I've always had a car that cost a lot to fill up. But I mean, just, I don't know, a month ago, it was $84, $86 to fill up the tank. Now it's $114. And that's not good. That's not good for anybody because it eventually puts a damper on things, on the local economy, on the economy at large. And I think you're right. Biden has made so many moves to financially destabilize this country, to destabilize the security of our country at our southern border, and to destabilize any peace that was brought about by Trump with his America First / peace through strength policies. And it's sad to say the least. Matt, thanks for the call. I got to take a quick pause right here. Coming back for the speed round with Frank, Bill, and Ken. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Ken, Lansing, Michigan, WILS. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Great show as always.
Thank you.
I am just thoroughly bewildered as to the state of our young people in this country, where over half of them think that Hamas was justified in doing what they're doing. I sure as hell hope we can turn this around in a hurry, buddy. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ken. You're 100% right. It's a very bad situation when we have generations of Marxists, leftists that believe this stuff, and they've now taught it to younger people who are going to go out there and take it to the streets. And there's a good piece that maybe tomorrow I'll share with you guys on the long relationship between certain leftist movements in the United States and Hamas, believe it or not. Thank you for your call, Ken. Let's go to Bill, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA, quickly. Bill, going once. Bill, going twice. Frank, Evergreen, Montana. Let's go to Frank on KOFI. Frank, go right ahead. We're taking it home with you, brother.
Hi, Rich. I'll try to keep it short here. I was going to go on to the big speech about the COVID brain fog, memory loss, and fatigue from the symptoms of long COVID. New research just came out yesterday, a few hours ago. It's really interesting. We really need more tryptophan from Turkey and things like that because we have a depleted serotonin level in our blood system. It affects our brains and everything. So it's not just brain fog for old people. I mean, all young people can have this
It's
too.
brain fog from old people, brain fog from the lack of tryptophan because of long COVID. And ultimately, Thanksgiving will cure long COVID. I think that's what you're saying. Frank, I appreciate you, brother. Big shout out to KOFI in Montana. And folks, that's it for me tonight. Keep it locked right here for the next show. And hasta la próxima. Until the next time, take care, good night, and God bless. I'm Rich Valdez.